Hello, everyone. How are you doing? I hope everyone is well. Uh, Welcome back from your quarter break. Finished up spring. Everybody did really well in my last class, and looking forward to this summer class. So, um, hopefully, you'll enjoy this class and learn about fantastic, powerful, and strong women. Okay? We go through my usual routine. Right, let me start the slideshow, start from the beginning. Okay. If you see here, the school code is HUM 106. That's for humanities. And title of the class is Lives of Extraordinary Women. So they're going to be famous women throughout all different times and show you how they became ambassadors, presidents, queens, warriors, you name it. So it's a little similar to the class I taught spring. So what I do is give you a background on who they were and some things that they did, and then we go into the book that I use, and you find out the intimate details that you could not find out on Wikipedia or a Google search. That's the little tidbits that I want you to learn that other people don't really learn about. Okay. All right. So without further ado, this class is scheduled for Thursday, July 6th, being the first week of the summer quarter. Thank you. All right. So we have Eleanor of Aquitaine, and this is her actual tomb. I would say coffin, but coffin's probably on the inside. So tomb effigy, it says. Okay, so she's inside there. All right, so gotta go through a little back up on her. Okay, can't just start talking about her like everybody knows. There's things I didn't know about her. So she was a queen between April 9th, 1137 through April 1st, April 1204. So quite a long time ago. And like I normally say, older than me, believe it or not. Right? Yeah. Okay. And her predecessor who came before him was William the 10th, not William X, we use now. And successor was John. So you see here first, she was Queen Consort of France. And that was August 1st, 1137 through March 21st, 1152. And coronation when she became queen was December 25th, 1137. So she became Queen of France. And she was the queen or the consort of England. 19th of December, 1154 through July 6th, 1189. And then she became queen, or the only king, because she got rid of the king. He died. 19th of December, 1154. Okay. All right. So now some little literature about her. Again, born 11/22, died April 1st, 1204. So she lived quite a long time for people at that time. We still had people in the American Wild West, like 1850s and 60s, that living to 45 was considered very lucky. So she lived like double that. All right, so we'll skip the French here. All right, pronounced. Okay, so she was Queen of France from 1137 to 1152, so 15 years, as the wife of King Louis VIII. She was Queen of England, so she was Queen of two different countries. I don't think modern women can touch her now because they only be Queen of one country. So she was also Queen of England from 1154 to 1189, and as the wife of King Henry II and Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right from 1137 until her death in 1204. As the heiress of the House of Poitiers, which controlled much of southwestern France, she was one of the wealthiest and most powerful women in Western Europe during the High Middle Ages. You see that, folks? One of the wealthiest and most powerful. She was a patron of poets such as Wace, Benoit de Saint-Maur, Bernard de Ventardon, and she was a key leading figure in the Second Crusade. We had the First Crusades, and now we have the Second. Eleanor was a daughter of William X, Duke of Aquitaine, and Eleanor de Chatillon. She became Duchess upon her father's death in 1137. 3 months later, she married Louis, son of her guardian, King Louis VI of France. A few weeks later, Eleanor's father-in-law died, and her husband succeeded him as Louis VII. Eleanor and Louis VII had 2 daughters, Marie and Alix. Soon afterwards, she sought an annulment, which is like a divorce, of her marriage, but her request was rejected by Pope Eugene III. Eventually, Louis agreed to an annulment. That was the husband. As 15 years of marriage had not produced a son, so he felt ashamed that she was not giving him a son, but 2 daughters. The marriage was annulled on the 21st of March, 1152, on the grounds of consanguinity within the 4th degree. You want to look that up? I'll let you look that up. It's not really important. It's just the grounds. If you didn't know, just let you know, since you're all in California now, when I was growing up, you, let's say the wife was having an affair, the husband could divorce her on the grounds of adultery, but they took that away, so you can't be divorced for having an affair anymore. So their daughters were declared legitimate. Custody was awarded to Louis, and Eleanor's lands were restored to her. So again, as a reverse in California now, where it's like 99% of women will get the children, even if, you know, she's on drugs or what have you. At that time, he got the kids. And they were declared legitimate, so they were still royalty. And she was giving back her lands. As soon as the annulment was granted, Eleanor became engaged to her third cousin. Guess that's okay. You're not supposed to marry your first cousin. Third cousin was named Henry. He was the Duke of Normandy. So she didn't marry regular guys here, only royalty was her strategy. The couple married on Whitsun, 18th of May, 1152. Henry and Eleanor became king and queen of England in 1154. They had 5 sons and 3 daughters. However, Henry and Eleanor eventually became estranged, which means they stopped getting along. Henry imprisoned her, wow, in 1173 for supporting the revolt of their eldest son, Henry the young king, against him. Henry, I guess the old king. She was not released until the 6th of July, 1189, when her husband died. And their third son, Richard I, ascended or took the throne. As Queen Dowager, Eleanor acted as regent while Richard went on the Third Crusade. She lived well into the reign of her youngest son, John. Right, so a lot of marriages there, a lot of royalty mixing. I'll get into her early life because that's, important to learn about her. it leads into what she became later. Eleanor's year of birth is not known precisely, so they give an approximate. A late 13th century genealogy of her family, listing her as 13 years old in the spring of 1137, provides the best evidence that Eleanor was perhaps born as late as 1124. On the other hand, some chronicles mention the fidelity, which is like a truth oath of some lords of Aquitaine on the occasion of Eleanor's 14th birthday in 1136. This and her known age of 82, like I said, she lived like double the age of people even hundreds of years later, made 1122 the most likely year of her birth. Her parents almost certainly married in 1121. Her birthplace may have been Poitiers, Bordeaux, or Neuville-sur-Altis, where her mother and father died when Eleanor was 6 or 8. Eleanor was the oldest of 3 children of William X, Duke of Aquitaine, whose glittering ducal court was renowned in early 12th century Europe, and his wife, Énor de Châtillon, the daughter of Aimery I, Viscount of Châtillon, and Dangereux de Ile-Bouchotte, who was William the Ninth's longtime mistress, oh dear, as well as Eleanor's maternal grandfather. You see these people with the way that they marry, and oh, it's crazy. Her parents' marriage had been arranged by Dangereux with her paternal grandfather, William the Ninth, back to him. Eleanor is said to have been named for her mother Aenor and called Eleanor from the Latin Eleanor, which means the other Aenor. My name's Elizabeth. Who's your sister? The other Elizabeth. It became Eleanor in the Langues de Oil of northern France, and Eleanor in English, of course. There was, however, another prominent Eleanor before her, Eleanor of Normandy. So it's like I'm Eleanor of Hollywood, and there was one who came before me, and she was Eleanor of K-Town, right? And she was an aunt of William the Conqueror, who lived a century earlier than Eleanor of Aquitaine. In Paris, as Queen of France, she was called Helianordis, or her honorific name, as written in the Latin epistles. By all accounts, Eleanor's father ensured that she had the best possible education. Eleanor came to learn arithmetic, the constellations, which means the stars, astronomy, and history. A lot of women were not given education. Most women were not. Very rare indeed for her. She also learned domestic skills such as household management and the needle arts of embroidery, needlepoint, sewing, spinning, and weaving. So spin the wheel and then weave material for clothing. Eleanor developed skills in conversation, dancing, such games as backgammon, checkers, and chess. Playing the harp, where they pluck it, bling, 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 and singing. Although her native tongue was Pottevin, which I don't even know what country that comes from, she was taught to read and speak Latin, was well versed in music and literature, and schooled in writing, hawking, and hunting, which means hunting with ox. The other Hadiths probably her by herself, killing foxes, arrows, what have you. Eleanor was extroverted, so she had a strong, outgoing personality, lively, intelligent, and strong-willed. So not a person to easily change her mind. I guess that leads to one being successful as a queen. Let's move on. Her 4-year-old brother William Aigret and their mother died at the castle of Talmont on Aquitaine's Atlantic coast in the spring of 1130. Eleanor became a heir presumptive or inheritor of her father's domains, which means lands. The Duchy of Aquitaine was the largest and richest province of France. Poitou, where Eleanor spent most of her childhood, and the Aquitaine together were almost 1/3 the size of modern France. It's pretty big. Eleanor had only one other legitimate sibling, a younger sister named Aelith, also called Petronia. Her half-brother Jocelyn was acknowledged by William X as a son, but not as an heir. That's interesting too. It's like, okay, you're my son, don't worry, but you cannot inherit the crown. That's strange. The notion that she and another half-brother, William, had been discredited, right? We don't believe you. Later, during the first 4 years of Henry II's reign as king, her siblings joined Eleanor's royal household. So some people couldn't inherit the good money or whatever, but they were still allowed to live in the royal court, so to speak. Inheritance, again, we're going to go over this because it was so important for this time, so you can get an idea. In 1137, Duke William left Poitiers for Bordeaux and took his daughters with him. Upon reaching Bordeaux, he left them in charge of the Archbishop of Bordeaux, one of his few loyal vassals. The Duke then sent out for the shrine of St. James of Compostela in the company of other pilgrims, people who perform a pilgrimage. However, he died on Good Friday of that year. Where's the arrow here? Oh. All right, Eleanor, aged 12 to 15, then became the Duchess of Aquitaine at such a young age, and thus the most eligible heiress in Europe. As these were the days when kidnapping an heiress was seen as a viable option for obtaining a title. So if you kidnapped her as a young duchess, you can use that to become, to grant a title for yourself. Interesting. Now they kidnap people for money, but at that time you could get a title and hopefully get some power. Yeah. Okay, so William dictated a will on the very day he died that bequeathed or gave his domains, which means lands, to Eleanor, and appointed King Louis VI of France as her guardian, so he must protect her. William requested of the king that he take care of both the lands and the duchess, and also, check this out, to find her a suitable husband. So he has to perform matchmaking too. Okay? Yeah. However, until a husband was found, the king had the legal right to Eleanor's lands. So he owned her lands until she got married. The Duke also insisted to his companions that his death be kept a secret until Louis was informed. The men were to journey from St. James of Compostela across the Pyrenees, which is a giant mountain range between France and Spain, quite high. As quickly as possible to call at Bordeaux to notify the Archbishop. Remember, Archbishop was the one true ally. Then to make all speed to Paris to inform the king. The King of France, known as Louis the Fat, there's no, what do they call that now? No, I'll think about it. no PC at that time, just fat. Was gravely ill at that time, suffering from a bout of dysentery, from which he appeared unlikely to recover. Yet, despite his impending death, which means he's going to die soon, Louis' mind remained clear. His eldest surviving son, Louis, had originally been destined for a monastic life, which means life as a monk, but he became the heir apparent when the first born Philip died in a riding accident in 1131. Okay, the death of William, one of the king's most powerful vassals, made available the most desirable duchy in France. While presenting a solemn and dignified face to the grieving Aquitanian messengers, Louis exulted when they departed, which means he threw a party. Rather than act as a guardian to the Duchess and Duchy, he decided to marry the Duchess to his 17-year-old heir and bring Aquitaine under the control of the French crown, thereby greatly increasing the power and prominence of France, which is pure strategy, and its ruling family, the House of Capet. Within hours, the king had arranged for his son Louis to be married to Eleanor, with Abbot Suger in charge of the wedding arrangements. Louis was sent to Bordeaux with an escort of 500 knights, along with Abbot Suger, Theobald II, Count of Champagne, and Raoul I, Count of Vermandois. Okay. Okay, the last part of this background stuff, which I'm not going to ask you any dates or names from this background material. When we get into the juicy material from the book I use, that's what you remember, and it'll be much easier to put forth. Queen of France, a 14th century representation of at the left, which it was just a photo, or not a painting, which was the wedding of Louis and Eleanor. I couldn't fit that in here. Same with Eleanor's grandfather, William the Ninth of Aquitaine. There's a picture of a rock crystal, which she gave to Louis as a wedding gift. So again, not important that you see these things. I don't want to confuse you. So on July 25th, 1137, Eleanor and Louis were married in the cathedral. This is what made her queen. In Cathedral of Saint Andre in Bordeaux by the Archbishop of Bordeaux immediately after the wedding. The couple were enthroned or crowned Duke and Duchess of Aquitaine. It was agreed that the duchy would remain independent France until Eleanor's oldest son became both King of France and Duke of Aquitaine. Thus, her holdings will not be merged with France until the next generation. So this goes where how she became, you'll see later, queen of both countries. As a wedding present, she gave Louis a rock crystal vase, which I said was in the picture. And it's on the Louvre, which is the most famous museum in France. Okay, this vase is the only object connected with Eleanor of Aquitaine that still survives. Louis' tenure, which means time as Count of Poitou and the Duke of Aquitaine and Gascony, lasted only a few days. Although he had been invested as such on the 8th of August, 1137, remember, you have to remember any dates. A messenger gave him the news that Louis VI had died of dysentery, but he did die. They said he was going to die. On August the 1st, while he and Eleanor were making a tour of the provinces, which is the countryside, he and Eleanor were anointed and crowned King and Queen of France on the Christmas Day of the same year. Possessing a high-spirited nature, which we talked about earlier, Eleanor was not popular with the staid or, country-style northerners, according to the sources. Louis' mother, Adelaide of Maurienne, thought her flighty and a bad influence. So flighty means a person that doesn't really pay attention to their responsibilities in life, right? She was not aided by memories of Constance d'Arles and the provincial wife of Robert II. Tales of whose immodest dress, so she dressed a little too sexy for the time, and then language was probably rough, were still told with horror. These were horror stories. Eleanor's conduct was repeatedly criticized by church elders, particularly Bernard de Clairvaux and Abbot Suger, as indecorous. So kind of painted her as a wild lady, you know. The king was madly in love with his beautiful and worldly bride, however, and granted her every whim, every wish and desire that she had, even though her behavior baffled, which means confused, and vexed him, which made him more confused and angry. Much money went into making the austere Cité Palace in Paris more comfortable, not for his sake, but for Eleanor's sake. You know? Yeah. All right. So this is a rendition of her. See the book she's carrying. You see the part of land where she's at. You know, England, France is over here. Her crown she's wearing, which you see was on her tomb. So now let's get into the juicy part. Now the parts we get in here from the book, you're going to have to remember because I'm going to ask you questions from it. Okay? But this is the easier stuff. So it says here, titled One Shock After Another. Eleanor of Aquitaine, born in Bordeaux, Aquitaine, France, about 1122. Again, we weren't sure the exact time. Died in Fontevraud, Anjou, France, 1204. So this is her claim to fame here in our book about extraordinary women of the world history. As Queen of France, as well as England, Europe's legendary central figure of the Middle Ages. So the most popular woman of the Middle Ages, which lasted a couple hundred of years. Okay. Young Eleanor often accompanied her father, the Duke of Aquitaine, as he traveled to castles all over his vast territory, so wide. Although he wasn't trying to teach her to rule, women were deemed naturally inferior, even instruments of the devil. That's how they were thought of in Europe during the Middle Ages. Not a good reputation to have, instruments of the devil. Eleanor absorbed his skill as a leader, though. When he died, she was 15 and extraordinarily valuable to him. And the property that was larger than the country of France at the time, she could read and write, unlike most women. So, like I told you earlier, majority of the women were not given an education, right? Not at all. And had unusually sophisticated tastes. So she did not like regular or common things, but she was said to be charming and lively. So you don't hear the word lively too much anymore. You might hear the word bubbly. So she attacked life, right? She wasn't one to sit there and say, well, I'm just going to read a book. The man who became King Louis VII of France was only too happy to marry her. A lot of men jumping at the chance to marry her. Eleanor had much influence on him and his country. But she loved to laugh. Life with Louis provided so few opportunities for humor. So she complained here, I thought to have married a king. Lively and adventuresome. Enjoy life, right? Because they have all the power and food and resources. But she complained, I find I had wed a monk. So I guess he didn't like to spend money, didn't like to enjoy himself, didn't like to laugh, just was too serious for her. That she was quite sad that she had made that decision, right? She jumped. Now, this is her jumping now. She jumped at the chance to join the Second Crusade, which means she wanted to actually fight in the Second Crusade. And this was a holy war that would take the couple far from their dull life at home. It's like any young person, they don't want to be bored. They want to explore. She offered Louis thousands of her vassals to use as an army and devoted herself to raising money to finance the journey. So you can see this was not a queen that sat behind the king by herself and let him make all the decisions and planning. She was involved. And she further shocked society when she gathered 300 women warriors to accompany her. So you see, even on top of that, she wanted to fight. You know, I mean, there's a lot of kings that won't even fight. They'll send an army out there and they'll sit way back or maybe not even leave their kingdom and they want to hear reports of what's going on. There's a few that wanted to fight, but most not. And then here's a queen says, I got 300 ladies backing me, and we all want to fight. So, like they said, this was a very strong-willed lady. Um, so, and like I mentioned earlier, young people wanting to not be bored and to explore the world. So it says here further, along the way, the new sights were dazzling. So as they traveled to these strange and foreign countries, they were very exciting. Rare foods, right? Fine fabrics, probably silk, what they're talking about. And Middle Ages in Europe, they were famous for, or I should say infamous, for pretty bad, non-appetizing foods. In any countries in the East where it's Middle East or Asia, they were already using all these interesting spices to have different kinds of cuisine. So this was all very exciting for her. And then, of course, she's a lady, so she enjoyed perfumed water, jetting, which means traveling quickly from fountains in Constantinople, which is now Turkey. But the adventure went badly, and the defeated queen and king returned to France in separate ships. So, yes, that's bad. They lost, what have you. But I would say that they were lucky to come back with their lives. They weren't captured and had their heads cut off, you know. So I guess it's only a bad thing for their ego, you know. But again, they should consider themselves lucky. Um, and they came back in separate ships, so a lot of soldiers were lost. Yeah. So as we continue, for a woman to ask for a divorce was unheard of at that time. So that's what they're saying is women could not, even as a queen. But Eleanor demanded that Louise release her from her vows, vows that people give each other when they get married. And like was stated before, he kept their two children. Now 29, she was still so valuable that when she rode from his court as fast as she could, she was ambushed or attacked by hiding knights, two of them, each intent on claiming her and her land. So see if they got her and held her for a ransom, then they would say, okay, now you get her lands because you captured the queen. But she escaped in 2 months. She married the most eligible bachelor around, the man who became Henry II, King Henry II of England. Um, it's funny, the most eligible bachelor around. I'm sure there was a lot of poor guys running around that were more eligible than him, but that was her choice. She's a woman of strategy. Why would she want a regular handsome guy with no money or power? Uh, she could become a queen of England now, her second country. 10 years younger than she. Oh, he was also younger. How nice. He was her equal in ambition. So he also had ambition for power and exciting life. They created an impressive empire. Kingdom, a long, large kingdom is an empire. You might have a small kingdom or a regular size, but when you have an empire, look out. It's like you say the Empire of England because they were in charge of so many countries. They used to say the sun never set on the English Empire. So the empire was not just England. Okay. Uh, so how do they make an impressive empire? By fending off rebels, which means fighting people who rebelled against them, whether they were local, foreign, fortifying borders, so making borders really strong so they could not be, or it would be difficult to be invaded, and relying on Eleanor's knowledge and experience. Obviously, the knowledge and experience she gained while being the Queen of France. So she hunted with Henry for fox. So, like I said earlier, she probably hunting for fox, and they were using arrows, because they're too far away to get with a sword or a knife. And quail. Quail are kind of like pigeons, right? They're a form of pigeon, right? And some people do eat them. You might go to a fancy restaurant somewhere, and people are eating quail. Believe it or not, you will see. I think I've eaten a quail by accident. Oh my God. And then she joined him on long, difficult trips at a moment's notice. So he would just say, I'm going to go on a trip to a faraway country. She's like, let's go. None of this. I got to put my makeup on or do my face. Let's go. Crossed the English Channel many times. So that picture that we saw, that drawing, you see there was a body of water after England and then France. So that's the English Channel. And she often did this while pregnant, where most women would just stay home. She had 8 or more children. That's physically, obviously, very strong. Just keep on having kids as she gets older. Yeah. But sometimes she stayed behind to rule in her husband's absence. Maybe when she was pregnant or giving birth. Otherwise, it sounds to me like if she was ready physically, um, you know, she's raring to go. I give her all the credit in the world, you know. Proceed. Fed up with Henry's many affairs, so I guess he had a lot of mistresses, girlfriends. One day, Eleanor simply moved out. So she didn't kick him out, she moved out. She established a court of her own, legal court, where poets and musicians thrived. So it means they were very successful, and a lot of them were there. Acrobats and jugglers did anything to get laughs. I'm kind of worried about that comment. Did anything? Does that mean they juggled cats, or I don't know. It sounds like it was a little rougher than what they're saying here. And women ruled the court. No men, women, wearing the finest clothes, colors to match their moods. That's an interesting writing there. It's like, I feel blue, so they wore blue. Right? The women held mock, which means not real, courts of love. So you might ask yourself, what goes on in a court of love? Pray tell. In which they handed down verdicts, which means, the judge swings the gavel and goes, you're guilty, right? Or innocent. So they handed down verdicts on the behavior of men who whose sole purpose or reason to live was to serve and adore women. You don't know what the verb adore means. It means you like and love so much anything the woman does. You know, people say they adore, restaurants or what have you, but you had to adore these high, powerful women of her court. So Eleanor dominated her children and sided, which means took sides with her son when they tried unsuccessfully to overthrow Henry. The rebellion was an act of such startling or shocking aggression that Henry tried to banish or kick out Eleanor to a convent. A convent means all nuns. She insisted she was not cut out for a religious life. So he imprisoned her in a remote castle without money or friends, alone except guards. So she was in prison, in jail. Oh my God, 15 long years later, she received news of Henry's death. Within an hour, she had been freed or let go and resumed her strenuous life as the queen, wearing red silk gowns trimmed with squirrel fur, jeweled belts showing off her small waist. She traveled constantly. How did she keep the small waist 15 years? By not eating anything, right? Prison food, bread and water. She traveled constantly from one end of her kingdom to another. She led armies, introduced financial and legal reforms. So she still loved to fight, but she also thought about financial and legal forms, how to improve the country. Um, so she worked fiercely to maintain peace. I guess even though she loved to fight, she was a woman of peace. One of the oldest people alive. Okay, I'm sorry here. And then she worked fiercely to maintain the peace. A lot of people can initiate peace, but then they can't maintain it. She tried her best to keep it going. And she did so by risking her own life. Well, the legal reforms, I'm sorry, one of the oldest people alive and with a good memory, she was trusted by the Pope, kings, and emperors. Emperor is another name for king, just different. Like you can be the last emperor of China, right? Uh, just are called emperor instead of king. Queen. After 65 years as a queen, it's a hell of a long time, especially back then when a lot of queens were killed and people didn't have long lifespans. Eleanor finally went to live at a convent. Again, nuns live. Finally, she agreed to that, where she died at 82. Wow, interesting life. A dominant political force, her actions continually revised Europe's geography. Well, that means lands changed because of her. Eleanor wanted her influence to last. She crafted politically useful marriages for her 10 children. So again, no marriage, telling her kids, no marriage for love, kids. You got to marry for power. And several of her children who grew up to become kings and queens. So a lot of her strategies worked. And into her 80s, she was still arranging the marriages of her grandchildren. A lady wouldn't stop. What's wrong with her? Okay. Eleanor changed Europe's idea of what a woman was. And after her death, all publicity about her was negative. I guess they were not happy with the things that she accomplished during her time. In his play King John, Shakespeare, famous writer, portrayed her as one of his scariest female characters ever. Talk about bad publicity. Not until the late 1800s did historians credit her with giving England a big push out of the bleak Middle Ages. So they credit her with making them succeed to get out of that. So my guess is we're done with the material. Okay, now we're on to the questions. Okay. Eleanor of Aquitaine, week 1. During Eleanor's youth, how were women deemed? So I use the actual word where you can find the answer. I could have changed it. It makes it more confusing, but if you can find deemed, you'll find the answer to this question. 2, when Eleanor married King Louis VII of France, what did she think later about him? So she makes a 2-comment saying about him. How did Eleanor shock society when she joined the Second Crusade? Who did she marry as her second husband? 5, Eleanor and Henry built an empire by doing which things? Okay, there's a list of things they did. So, like I tell my students every quarter, let's say she did 4 things, right? Her and Henry did 4 things. If you put only one, like if I put this on the midterm, you're not going to get the credit that someone who puts 2 or 3 or all 4. Okay, so be careful for that. 6, in Queen Eleanor's courts of love, verdicts were handed down on what? Okay, what were the issues? People didn't pay parking tickets. What were the issues? 7, how did Eleanor treat her children? Did she love them and spoil them and give them all the things that they wanted? 8, after King Henry II's death, she returned to being Queen of England and did which things? And again, there's a list here. So put as many as you can. And a word of advice, if there was a long list on something like 6 things, let's say, I wouldn't ask you to do 6. But again, whoever did more, like someone did 3, they got more points than someone who did 1 or someone who did 4. But I wouldn't ask you to do all 6. This is not 6, 3 or 4 things. 9, I'm only going to do 9. I usually do 10 questions, but it's the first week. I'll give you a break. You're coming back from the holiday. In the 1800s, historians credit Eleanor with giving England what? What does she give them? She finally gets credit here. Okay. All right, folks, so we have finished the material and we have finished the questions. So that's it for the first week. See, I can prove it to you. There you go. Right? All right, so hit the stop share. We're back to the beginning. So welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the first week. Before you know it, we'll be into the second week. Try to stay cool because the heat wave has just hit of summer. So take care, everyone, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.